Good evening. Welcome to the Politica Podcast. Grateful to have Tina Cannon with us. We've talked before, Tina, but
John.
This is a different, whole different track you're going on this time. So how does it feel?
Actually, that's where we met the first
Oh
time.
yeah, that's right.
When I was running 2 years ago.
Yeah. So how are things going?
Going great. We went up on Fox News today. We'll go up on radio next week.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So we're excited.
Who did you talk to today?
Who did I
on
talk
the
to?
Fox News?
Oh, no.
Oh.
It's our commercials are going on.
Oh, your commercials are. That's great. So
You're my big interview today, John.
yeah, okay, that's good.
You're better than
Well,
Fox
that's
News.
good.
You're
Oh
local.
yeah, thank you. Flattery gets you
It'll
everywhere.
get me everywhere,
Yeah.
yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's your push? What do you want to do different than what's been done?
My big push is the economics of it. That we are now $33 trillion in debt. The only way that you can really deal with $33 trillion in debt is there are two ways out. You either grow your way out or you inflate your way out. And you can tell that the federal government has decided to inflate their way out of this, and that's not acceptable, especially to those on the margins. If you talk to farmers, ranchers, families in Utah, small business owners, this really impacts them on their bottom line to inflate the currency the way we're doing. So we need someone who understands that, who understands how to fix that, and how you can turn it around really, really quickly.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting to me because in the past, this is the directions we're going or in the past, both parties hated communism, right?
Yeah.
Now it seems
Remember
like
those good old
yeah, and you know, I think John F. Kennedy would be considered a conservative today, but what really bothers me is now it used to be that the Republicans wanted to tax less and spend less, and the Democrats, of course, wanted to spend more, but they both hated communism and tax more. But now we're in a situation where the Republicans want to spend too.
Yeah, you have to go back to 1994 before you get a conservative Congress that actually stood on their principles and actually held a Democrat president to entitlement reform, and they reformed welfare under Newt Gingrich and the contract with America. But I think we're seeing the conditions for that very same movement happen again in this election, that you're going to see a red wave, and with conservatives in the conservative seats, especially fiscal conservatives who understand the issues and understand how you can balance a budget and bring things back in line, that we have real hope for the first time in a long time to turn this around and start coming back to a fiscally conservative Congress and a nation, because I think it's becoming a national security issue as the world looks to move away from the dollar as the reserve currency. That's a national security issue.
Yeah.
We can no longer play this game.
Well, you know, these new Keynesians took charge, and Janet Yellen is one of the leaders. Her husband won the Nobel Prize for this new modern monetary theory.
Monetary policy that's never worked ever
Well,
anywhere.
and you know what's interesting is their assumption is we can spend all we want, we can borrow all we want, and it won't matter as long as we're the default currency.
Yeah, but we don't.
At what point does that end?
It's starting to end now. You're seeing Russia, Iran, China all move to a different reserve currency, and they're talking about a petrodollar. And if that happens, we're done. We're at that point, we're Zimbabwe. We're the Weimar Republic. We start losing that power of being the reserve currency because there isn't a need for the U.S. dollar. That's when I say it's a national security issue. If we collapse economically, we are no longer the world power. We cannot afford to make these mistakes any longer.
Yeah, and you know, that used to be kind of a given with any Republican. Would be talking like that, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, luckily under Newt Gingrich, Clinton went along with them, right?
Yeah, and you remember the big speech of the days of big government are over. That was under a Democrat president with Bill Clinton because they held him to account. And that is an important part of Congress, and it's exciting to see elected officials who actually understand the role, to reclaim the role of Congress in making the rules, in setting the budget, and actually following through with setting policy instead of allowing it to be an executive order. If these things had been done under Trump with legislative policy or legislative rules, instead of an executive order, it wouldn't have been turned around the way it was so quickly under Biden. Because what is done by executive order is quickly undone by executive order.
Right.
So it's time for Congress to retake its role.
Yeah. It is. How do you do that?
Well, first you have to elect people who understand what their role is, understand what the proper role of government is, and then it's easy after that, because so much of what the federal government is doing is not the role of the federal government. That's your role in the state.
Right.
And it's time that we had people who respect it, understand it, and start pushing these issues back to states and back to local governments. That's why the decision from the Supreme Court is so exciting, because that's the movement of the court. That is really at the core of that decision is, this is a states' rights issue, and let's give it back to the states and to the people where these types of issues belong.
That's actually exciting, huh?
Yeah.
That we have a Supreme Court now that actually believes in federalism.
Yes.
And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I still don't understand how this got out, though, how it leaked out. This never happened.
Well, I think that's part of the country that we're in now is, I think this was someone who's desperate, who on the left, who's desperate that we want to put political pressure onto these justices to change their mind. And that's why that's the point of the rallies, of people getting out to try to put that political pressure on. And that's a sad day in America, where we break the trust of an attorney, of the privacy, the security of the Supreme Court, and how that deliberation process happened in order to put political pressure on a non-political body. The Supreme Court has never been a political body. And that's one of the most unfortunate things about what happened. What is really exciting about this is, Kentucky did that law. This was over Kentucky's legislative bill over abortion, and it was designed to push this issue, to push Roe v. Wade to an actual decision at the Supreme Court. Do you know what that means for Utah's legislature, John? You could start doing this very thing with carefully crafted legislation.
We have a heartbeat bill that basically said
if
Roe is overturned.
Think of it now on all of the other issues that are federalism issues. Think of it on a public lands issue. That's why it's so exciting to me. It goes so far beyond the sanctity of life. This goes into, if you have a Supreme Court who understands federalism and respects the 10th Amendment, then it comes back to state legislatures for, okay, what are you going to craft next? What are you going to do on public lands that actually pushes the issue for the state of Utah
that's a huge
to
issue
control?
In Utah, isn't it?
Yes. 66% of our land is controlled by the federal government. And that's not...
That was the real loss. People don't realize what a loss it was to have Rob Bishop step
That's
down.
why it's important to have him as a mentor and to actually understand this issue. Earlier in the week, Chris Cannon and Rob Bishop and I had a sit-down meeting talking about this. Did you know that within the municipalities of Utah, there's estimated to be 150,000 to 200,000 acres of BLM land? That's the Bureau of Land Management. That's not a national park. That's not a monument. That's not even a historic site. These are plots of ground that the BLM in most cases doesn't even know they control. So there were 32 acres in Manaway that were finally turned back over to Manaway. Hyde Park had the same thing. Park City had the same thing. Do you know there's another 600,000 acres within a mile of municipal boundaries? Think what that does to the price of land in Utah if we are just able to add that supply to the market. You turn that back over to local governments, and they're able to create affordable housing on those types of lots and push it back into the private sector. Think of what that does in Utah with our housing crisis right now. These are big issues, and you need a partner at the federal government level that can help state and local governments and understand this issue so we can start pushing this control back to Utah.
So that's one of your major issues then, is federal lands issues, which actually is what Rob Bishop wanted, right?
Yeah. And when you understand, but it goes back even to Chris Cannon, to Jim Hansen. These are things that have been going on for a long time, and it's important that you keep that momentum going, that you understand it. And it's one of the differences between Blake and I, is when Blake talks about doing a public-private partnership for housing on federal land, that's exactly opposite of where I believe it should go, because the state of Utah and its housing on its state parks manages its housing so much better than the federal government. Why don't we push this back to at least the state of Utah, or even better, do like they did in Park City, in Manaway, in Hyde Park, and push it back to the local government? and allow this land to return to the private sector where it was always intended to be and where it is in the eastern states. So to understand those issues and understand how those mechanisms work is an important part of the role of your congressman.
Yeah. What are the other issues that you're keen on?
So we talked about...
That's a big one.
Yeah, we talked about the
huge.
budget. That's huge. We talked about... But I've spent my career in tax, and especially in small business taxation. So understanding the tax laws and how they're actually structured is an important thing for me. You can turn that around really quickly. You know what a war it's been on small business over the last 2 years. It's absolutely incredible how difficult this is. And all of it being done through federal policy. You could turn things around really, really quickly. It's really difficult for a small business owner to be able to hire in a small business when they're competing with federal unemployment. When the compensation is higher for unemployment than it is to go to work, what do you think people do?
They stay home.
Yeah. I know for my son in college, he had so many of his friends who spent the whole summer playing during 2020, where his mom made him go to work.
Yeah. Well, that's good, though.
I
wish we could. I mean, you know, like you said, we either grow out of this crisis,
or we inflate our way out.
Or we inflate our way out. And the problem with the inflation like that is the people that it hurts are people who've saved their money throughout their lives to have a good retirement. And all of a sudden, the government wants to take it all back.
Exactly. And it's hurting our kids as well, because how do they ever, when the median price of a home is so far beyond the median income of a family in Utah, how do your kids ever afford a house?
Yeah. They don't.
Exactly.
You know, I have a son that just got married, and, you know, he's facing that. Even though he's been very careful throughout his life to save money for that point.
Well, at this point, when you're inflating the way it is, when you're at 10% record levels of inflation, when you're at that level of inflation, and then the value of a price of a home is in Utah is even beyond that, it doesn't matter how much you save. You can never catch back up because your daily expenses are going up as well, and it's eating into that savings even more. So these are issues that, you know, 60%, you know this because you're a businessman, 60% of the economy is through small business owners. We have to return to allowing an entrepreneur to start a business, to thrive in that business, to become the medium and then the large business as they grow through a business cycle. And we're crushing that at the entrepreneurial level by really discouraging it, and then by taking so much of the equity out of their business. When a small business tries to stay open, and it can't compete when Home Depot can stay open, but Ace Hardware can't, and your small restaurants, most of these owners had their life savings were in those businesses. Their retirement were in those businesses. You impacted them for the end of time in the value that they lost.
And now you're continuing to do that because of the inflationary pressure.
Well, and think about that, the Trump tax cuts. Most people don't know that the S Corp, which is the majority of small business, S corporations were taxed differently than the C corporation. And it was almost an afterthought to the Trump tax cuts. As those Trump tax cuts expire, C corporations will actually have a better tax rate than S corporations will. And again, most of your small businesses are S corporations. That's why the S corporation exists. And you're going to start seeing even a tougher road for small business as it tries to navigate through this. It's time for someone who understands all of these issues and can put it all together into a cohesive argument, and then bring people along because I think we're going to see people who are very much aware of this coming in.
So how do you get that message out there?
How do I in this race?
Yeah.
One person at a time, a little bit at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But that's the fun part about this, is going out and talking with people. I really enjoy it, that it's the people one-on-one. You know, we went up to Rich County and talking to farmers and ranchers up in Rich County, and that frustration. You know, Rich County, if they wanted to give you a message, it would be green energy will not work here. Yeah. There isn't anywhere to plug in. And have you tried to run an electric tractor? It doesn't exist, and it's not going to be efficient up there. And yet they're watching diesel prices have more than doubled. Fertilizer prices, more than doubling at this point. All of their costs that are going into their operations.
And their margins were so thin.
Exactly. So you have farmers and ranchers who are now, both husband and wife, are working 2 jobs to put the money back into the ranch just to hold on. And when you consider that 96% of ranches in Utah are privately owned, 95% of farms privately owned, we're in a situation where all of those costs that are being borne by the farmer and the rancher now are coming to the grocery store next. We have yet to see this, and families are already hurting with the price of fuel. And it's going to get worse. We have to turn this around for the sake of families, for the sake of farmers, for the sake of ranchers. We need someone who understands the basic economics.
So when you look at Congress, are there groups there that you would align yourself with?
Oh, yeah. I've spent the last 2 years being involved with the Freedom Caucus, with Club for Growth, with economics issues, and doing a monthly training every month with economists coming on and talking about what we see at a federal level, where the trends are going. If you look at it globally, if you could look at it nationally and then go to locally, how you can actually have the biggest impact the quickest. And I'm telling you, this is all going to come down to energy policy. That's what got us into this mess.
Well, you know, and one of the problems today, and our state treasurer has been really hot on this issue. ESG scores, right?
You know, that started in China. And my husband served his mission in Hong Kong, and we've watched this happen to Hong Kong, and where those social credit scores really got started. And friends that he has known for 40 years at this point, we're not as young as we used to be, but 40 years at this point. And look, the United States didn't stand for them when they were going through their push down of freedom in Hong Kong. But we've seen this playbook before, and we should know that that's nothing but communism. That's nothing but control of the means of everything.
Yeah.
Everything. If you can control the money and who has access to the money supply, who has access to financing, you control everything else.
Yeah. I'm really glad that
Marlo's been fantastic.
Yeah, I'm glad that he's taken steps there. In fact, he came for discussion last week, and it's actually scary.
Yeah. So we've got, I think the last number I saw is 26 states that are following that same example, that same playbook, and they're really starting to push back on ESG. Now you need a federal government who understands it as well. Our federal retirement programs shouldn't be going to these companies either.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, the part that people don't like to hear is when I say, John, how much of your money is in Vanguard and BlackRock?
Yeah.
Because I know I looked at mine. And I think we saw that with what happened with Disney. When people started voting with their feet and selling their Disney stock,
well, and
canceling their memberships.
What's interesting?
We have that same responsibility.
Yeah.
Here.
Well, and these ESG scores is what's driven companies to hire these woke executives, right? Because they're not doing
what business does and looking for the best return. They've got a completely different agenda.
Because they've got to get financing.
But
right?
think about that. We keep talking about it as these woke people. Are they really woke? But think about where those green energy products are manufactured.
Right.
That's China. Because all we've done is switch oil and gas, which is done cheaper, better, cleaner here in the United States, in the oil and gas industry, and switch it to solar panels, which are manufactured in China. We're just sending them even more of our money without they having to buy a bond.
Yeah.
It's not just woke. This is an effort to destroy the U.S. dollar.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look
I better
at
get
that,
my tinfoil hat.
No,
I said it.
No. But you're making some very good points. That's an important thing. I mean, that the E part of it, the environmental issues. Mm-hmm. We saw that wave go through, and it's still going through, mm-hmm. right? But this social part of it, the social credit score piece of it, right? Your social responsibility. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting.
But don't you think you're seeing that now, especially on social media, the cancellation of people that has become so huge? I was talking to someone about this over the vaccine mandate a while back, and I said, well, do you remember Jenny McCarthy went through this?
Yeah.
She talked about vaccines and immunizations. I think Jenny McCarthy was canceled before we knew that it was called canceling.
Yeah.
Over this very issue. This has been going on for a while. It's
Yeah,
not
it
new.
has.
They're just getting better at
It'll
it.
be interesting to see what Elon Musk does at Twitter, right?
Don't you love the private market solution to this with
Yeah.
Elon?
Yeah, well, what was interesting to me is Jason Chaffetz was saying the other day that his following on Twitter actually increased dramatically.
Yeah, there were a lot of people.
There
who
were a
said
lot
that.
of people that were saying that, and I think they were probably just suppressed,
Yeah.
right? And now you're starting to see some of that work out, but it'll be interesting. Elon did say that if he has people on the right
Yeah, there'll
as
be
mad as the people on the left,
right and the left, who are
right?
unhappy with
Then
this.
then he's probably at the right right point.
That's exactly the point. But isn't that true in everything? When you've got equal people on both sides mad at you, you know you're in the middle.
Yeah.
And you know you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But you've done this. You know how that is on legislation. You usually have equally mad people on both sides. That's
Well,
part of being elected.
unfortunately, I had the teachers unions and the PTA mad at me last year, but we'll see what happens next.
Yeah.
I asked for advice
I tell
from
people
someone.
all the time that I'm as proud of my political enemies as I am my political friends, because it really tells you who I am.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to have a record, to actually know and be able to go look where someone has stood.
Yeah.
But I tell you, that's nothing. Wait till you do land use in Utah. If you really, really want to live, do land use.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a minute. We're talking to Tina Cannon.
Hi, I'm Ricky Hatch. I'm your Weber County Clerk Auditor. I'm running for re-election and have a primary this year. I don't want you to just trust me. I want to talk to you just briefly about things that I've done. Election security has been hot for the past couple of years. I want you to know that I, as a CPA, looked at the election through an accounting and audit and control standpoint. I identified risks and safeguards and then gaps and brought those to the state legislature and the lieutenant governor's office, and we created legislation to further strengthen our election security and integrity here in Utah. But elections are only about half my job. The other half is auditing, and as a CPA, I helped establish an internal audit function and program at the county to help make sure that your money is being spent wisely and isn't wasted or involved in fraudulent stuff. Mostly, I want to listen to you. I don't have all the answers. I'm still learning, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you so much.
And we're back with Tina Cannon.
It's been fun.
Yeah, Tina, I got to hand it to you. This is an important race.
Yeah, it is.
And
This is my home, John. I care deeply about it.
Yeah.
I've spent 54 years in it, and I don't tell you my age lightly. I'm a woman. But I've earned it. I grew up in Box Elder County. I went to college in Cache. My kids were born while we were living in Davis and Weber County, and I've spent 22 years in Morgan County.
Yeah.
So this has been my home.
Yeah, the whole district really, right?
Yeah. I care deeply about it, and I can give you stories about what it means to be from all of those areas and I have a husband who's been in the aerospace industry for 35 years. I know what it looks like to have brain drain in the aerospace industry. My father-in-law is an Air Force veteran, 25 years. I know what it's like to be in the VA.
Yeah.
I know exactly what that care looks like, and I know we can do better for our veterans. But my husband, being the son of an Air Force colonel, he had moved 18 times before he graduated from high school. So I also know what it's like for the families that are stationed at Hill and how you can make their lives easier as well. So.
Yeah, that's an important asset. I mean, that's the crown jewel that people talk about here.
Well,
but if you look at not only that, but the whole Northrop project coming into Utah.
Oh, yeah. So my husband is the technical advisor on the GBSD program at Hill.
Oh, he is.
This is where he was the chief engineer on the redesign of the Minuteman. So this is the replacement for the Minuteman. So this has been his career. He's done strategic and he's done space. So we've been very aware of the GBSD program, and we have yet to feel all of the impacts of that growth here in northern Utah.
Yeah.
But that is the bread and butter. That is the economics of northern Utah.
Yeah, that's part. Ogden actually was stated as one of the
most
overvalued,
yes,
right,
yeah,
properties,
I saw
and
that.
there could be a, but the
that's
thing is we've got
people coming.
Yeah, it's this
and
big
that's
demand
supply
shock
and
that we
demand.
had. Yeah,
That's basic economics, supply and demand. That's why if you know that you've got BLM land, that is surplus land inside municipal boundaries in northern Utah, what that does to the market. But think about the transportation issues that are federal, state, and local projects that are going to need to happen right around Hill Air Force Base. Because think of all of those new people coming in and out of Falcon Hill.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, these people, a lot of them are moving from the plants that have closed in California.
Yeah.
And so they've already dealt with overpriced housing, right?
Yeah, so they come in.
They come in
they
and
can afford it.
They can afford these houses.
Yeah, they're just rolling into a house.
At obscene prices,
Yeah.
right?
Which again goes back to not making it available for our own children that are here. We have to have some creative solutions. But that's where I understand local government. A lot of the housing issues, unless it comes to the federal land that we can turn back over, those are going to be local government. I'm a 10th Amendment.
So why should someone vote for you?
Because I actually understand all of these issues. I've been involved a long time. If you want to know what it's like to represent Utah in Congress, it's kind of like representing little Morgan County, which is a Wasatch-backed county, on the Wasatch Front Regional Council. So I've had to do that. I've had to be the scrappy person who finds a way to make a difference for her smaller community among all the big players.
You know, it's interesting.
Davis County like to think of themselves as the biggest players.
It's interesting because
that's exactly what it is.
You really are an outsider coming into this. But
I am.
How do people get this notion that you're establishment?
Because I've been elected twice. But that's what's funny is I've stood. You remember when we did the tax referendum? You worked on this with me.
Yeah.
And they needed someone with tax experience to actually be able to articulate, no, we're not going over a fiscal cliff. These are the revenue projections. This is how the state income tax works compared to the federal. Your incomes are coming in later. They needed someone who could talk about how that all worked. But that made people, you know how it went with that legislation. That was all establishment. So that didn't make me friends among the establishment when I stood on the other side.
Right.
But that's what happens when you take a tough stand.
Yeah, that
you know what that's
hurt,
like.
Well, that actually hurt me in my election.
Yeah.
You know, having the whole.
You don't fit in the establishment because you've stood, but yet they consider you establishment. It's an interesting, but again, I feel like that puts me in the greatest spot because I am beholden to none.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. The other key to winning a congressional race is gathering the resources necessary.
Yeah.
And how?
Hey, I don't take on a sitting incumbent lightly.
Yeah.
He's very well funded.
Right.
Very well funded. But we always knew that. But here's the difference with me. He was always going to outspend me. He was never going to outwork me. And that's true of who I've always been. I put in a lot of time. I put in a lot of effort. I tend to be everywhere. Just follow us on social media. You'll see.
Yeah.
We'll be everywhere. And that's good old-fashioned politicking.
Yeah, it is.
That's
really,
what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
just
really
meeting
is.
with people, getting out there, and spreading that message. Because I actually know these people. I have actually spent my life among these people. I care deeply. And if nothing else, we're going to get that message out of how this economy is impacting farmers, ranchers, families, small businesses here in northern Utah. And that's what's important. This is a representative seat. That means we're a reflection of those people. And that's important to know who they are, to know how this is being impacted by federal policy and how to turn it around.
You seem to have a fire in your belly.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. This is my home. This is my family. But John, you know what that's like. You want that same country that you had growing up to be there for your kids and hopefully my grandkids someday.
Yeah.
And the hopeful part of that is that I have grandkids someday. I don't have them yet.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, neither do we. We've got that in common. So what would we're running out of time now. So what would kind of your final statement be to people that are watching?
Get on board. Help us. Come get involved. TinaCanna.com. Go out, donate, like, share, join us along the trail. Come out and meet me. Have a good time doing it. Ask your questions individually. We'd love to see you along the trail. But if you follow me on my social media or on TinaCanna.com, we keep an updated list of all of our events. So come on out. Watch for us on our radio announcements, and we'll send you a text when we're going to be in your area. But looking forward to meeting a lot of people and really building a grassroots movement, because that's really what will win this. Is to take on the establishment, you have to be able to do it from the grassroots. And that's what we're doing.
Very good. Thank you very much. And thank you guys for watching.
Hey, thank you for having me here.